We are all cafeteria Catholics. So what? Let's enjoy the church's feast. Daryl Grigsby in the National Catholic Reporter, July 7th, 2023. Daryl Grigsby is the author of In Their Footsteps, Inspirational Reflections on Black History for Every Day of the Year, and is currently a presenter in the Jesuit School of Theology Sabbatical Renewal Program. He is also president of the Board of Directors of Color Me Human in Nevada County, and a member of the Board of Directors of Leadership Foundations. Often we hear some Catholics speak of other Catholics as cafeteria believers. This is often a subtle criticism of those who appear to pick and choose from the cafeteria food booth what they want, leaving behind the distasteful or uninviting parts of the menu. This term gives the impression of a person not serious about their faith, one who selects what is easy to digest and avoids the harder elements. Yet I would argue that we are all cafeteria Catholics. In its 2,000-year history, global reach, and Big Tent, we are all picking and choosing from the vast menu of Catholic theology, thought, and practice. Our choices are reflected in the parish we attend, the books we read, the causes we support, the votes we cast, the political parties we join, and the popes we prefer. All us Catholics are making choices. Do we read Thomas Merton's Seven-Story Mountain or Scott Hahn's Rome, Sweet Rome? Do we support migrants at the border or march in Right to Life rallies? Are we members of a Catholic worker house or the Knights of Columbus? Is Black Lives Matter an atheist leftist formation, as some bishops assert, or a legitimate and necessary protest, as other bishops describe it? Are we aligned with Tyler, Texas Bishop Joseph Strickland, or San Diego Cardinal Robert McElroy, Benedictine Sister Joan Chittister, or the late Port Clare's Mother Mary Angelica, founder of EWTN, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, or San Francisco Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone? For context, since this article was written, Pope Francis has promoted Cardinal Robert McElroy to be the next Archbishop of Washington, D.C. Pope Francis has also removed Joseph Strickland from his position of Bishop of Tyler, Texas, in November of 2023 for financial mismanagement of his diocese and for violating his vow of obedience. Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone of San Francisco, Nancy Pelosi's home diocese, has attempted to prevent her from receiving the Eucharist due to her support for legalized abortion. In response, Pelosi has since received the Eucharist from Pope Francis himself and from Cardinal Wilton Gregory in D.C., as well as at many other parishes both in and out of San Francisco. A beauty and strength of the Catholic Church is our Big Tent. At some non-Catholic churches I have attended, it is obvious political perspectives are very much aligned. I have been to Catholic parishes where it is just as obvious theological and political views represent center, left, and right. The main issue is not whether we are cafeteria Catholics, but whether we are still feasting at the banquet. Psalm 23 reminds us our cup is overflowing. In the Gospel of John, Jesus tells his friends, "I have many more things to say to you." That gospel also reminds us of his fullness we have received, grace upon grace. The writer of Ephesians prays that we all have the strength to comprehend the love of Christ and be filled with the fullness of God. Spanish poet and mystic John of the Cross wrote in his poem, The Spiritual Canticle, that if you gather together all that the saints and holy people have learned of God over the centuries, the greater part remains to be unfolded. A question we must ask then, no matter our current theological, social, and political perspectives: is that all God has to say to us, or is there more? Are there many more things? Is there grace upon grace? And are we filled yet with God's fullness? Jesus told Nicodemus that the Holy Spirit is like the wind. We hear the sound of it, but we do not know where it has been or where it is going. To say we know it all and we hold all truth is to undermine the freedom and liberating energy of the Holy Spirit. Our truths as we know them are partial and in constant need of expansion and change. If someone says they understand fully what God has revealed, I suggest such a view is unbiblical and against Catholic teaching. The late Swiss priest, author, and theologian Hans Jung wrote in The Church Maintained in Truth that just as sin is overcome by grace, the gospel truth shines more brightly as it corrects our errors. Jung suggested that we are corrected to the extent we are open to the Holy Spirit. Jung wrote, God's Spirit is under no law other than that of his own freedom, no justice other than that of his own grace, under no power than that of his own fidelity. The Church does indeed try continually to take over the Spirit, but it cannot possess him, cannot control, restrain, direct, or master him. Vatican II is a prime example of our collective choosing. Some Catholics believe Vatican II saved the Church from irrelevance and decay, and others believe it has irreparably harmed Catholicism. Opposition to the documents and spirit of Vatican II persists, despite the years it took to draft the documents and the over 90% approval votes from the more than 2,000 bishops from around the world participating in the event. It was the first ecumenical council that could be truly termed global, as past councils were dominated by Western Europeans. One of those documents, Lumen Gentium, the dogmatic constitution on the Church, speaks directly to our collective role in continuing theological reflection and attainment of truth. Chapter 12 notes, discernment in matters of faith is aroused and sustained by the Spirit of truth. Through it, the people of God adheres unwaveringly to the faith given once and for all to the saints, penetrates it more deeply with right thinking, and applies it more fully in its life. While recognizing the importance of the faith given once and for all to the saints, the text emphatically urges us toward more deeply, and more fully. Both convey a sense that God's wisdom, mercy, and justice have yet to be exhausted. The document affirms John of the Cross's poetic proclamation that the greater part still remains to be unfolded. Despite all we know and believe and do, there is still more. Therefore, we should all confess our status as cafeteria Catholics, with the recognition that the feast continues. Lumen Gentium says we must understand our faith more deeply and apply the faith more fully. If we had access to all we needed, we would not need more. If God's truth were exhausted in our cherished positions, political ideologies, and sense of right, there is no need for more. More is not necessarily more of the same, but more new. St. Augustine wrote in his Confessions, "Late have I loved you, O beauty ever ancient, ever new." Almost 2,000 years ago, Augustine recognized that God is ever new and continually transcending our limits. Revelation is not complete. Revelation is constant. Tradition, which many Catholics herald as fixed and irrefutable, is merely the formalized expression of the Church's past experience with God. Those experiences are not over. For every day, each of us have new and expanding encounters with God. These experiences do not detract from tradition. They, in fact, add more. There is more to God and to the love of Christ than any of us have fully understood. Whether we are conservative or progressive, traditional or liberal, the banquet is still open. Our ongoing question should be, are we done choosing from the menu, or are we still feasting?